Hello, my name is Rhiannon. A few weeks after I won $9 million, I fell down a staircase. At least, that's what they told the hospital. What they didn't mention. That my sister was the last person behind me, and that 2 days later, she filed my death certificate. I was alive, bruised, broken, and very much breathing. But no one came. Not my mother, not my sister, not even a lawyer. They'd already declared me legally gone and claimed everything I owned. My house, my accounts, even my name. Have you ever woken up in a hospital bed and realized your entire family had decided you were more valuable dead than alive? Because I have. And what came after that wasn't survival. It was resurrection. So tell me, what would you do if your sister tried to erase you with a pen instead of a gun? The gas station at the corner of Rutledge and King had flickering overhead lights and a soda machine that hadn't worked since 2004. But it was on my route home, and every Thursday, I stopped in to buy milk, scratch-offs, and cat litter, even though I didn't own a cat. That Thursday was no different, except the numbers on the scratch-off matched exactly. I stared at them inside my car for nearly 10 minutes. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. The noise inside my head just vanished. $9 million. Just like that. No trumpets. No applause. Just the quiet beep of the pump behind me, the hum of a traffic light switching red to green, and the dull ache in my lower back from sitting too long. I didn't tell anyone. Not then. Not even when I got home and sat in the dark, holding the ticket like it might vanish if I breathed too hard. It wasn't because I didn't want to celebrate. It was because I already knew what would happen if they found out. You have to understand, I didn't grow up in a family where good news stayed yours for long. When we were kids, my sister Seraphine got everything she wanted, usually before she asked. Piano lessons. A Jeep for her 16th. Spring trips to New York. I was 2 years younger and always reminded of it. Through clothes passed down, chores passed up, and decisions already made. If Seraphine didn't like a restaurant, we didn't go. If she didn't want to share a toy, our mother said, "Let her have it, Rhiannon, you're the easy one." It was supposed to be a compliment. I knew better. Seraphine went into public relations, which, if you ask me, is just a fancy term for professional manipulation. Our mother, Odessa, still called her our fixer. And me? I answered phones for an insurance office and paid my rent in cash because our landlord never updated the payment portal. The point is, if I had told them right away, they would have swallowed my win like it was a shared family event. So instead, I invited them to dinner. Just dinner. Nothing special. The house smelled like garlic and thyme, a nod to Dad's lasagna recipe from when he was alive and believed family dinners could solve anything. I hadn't cooked that dish since he passed, but I wanted to feel like something still belonged to us, something untainted. Odessa arrived first, a full half-hour early, carrying 2 white candles and an open bottle of white wine. She kissed my cheek and said, "Let's make this nice, honey," as if I'd invited her to a televised event. Seraphine came 10 minutes later, wearing heels too high for hardwood floors, and her PR smile, charming, flawless, entirely hollow. She handed me a bottle of red and said, "From my reserve," like I'd asked for a donation. Merrick arrived last. He wasn't family by blood, but he'd been our legal go-to since we were teenagers. Odessa trusted him with everything. "Merrick's practically one of us," she always said. That night, I learned she meant it. The food was served. Small talk was exchanged. Laughter chimed politely off the walls like wind chimes that had forgotten how to sing. And then, just before dessert, I said it. "I won the lottery," I told them, setting down my fork. $9 million. At first, no one reacted. You'd think I'd said I'd found a 20 on the sidewalk. Then Seraphine blinked, once, slowly, and smiled. "Well," she said, lifting her wine, "that's certainly unexpected." Odessa reached for her napkin, dabbed the corner of her mouth, and asked, "Are you sure it's real, sweetie?" Merrick leaned forward. "Have you claimed it yet? It might be wise to hold off until we discuss structure." I blinked. "Structure?" "Trusts, assets, liabilities," he said. $9 million is a blessing, but without guidance, it can become a curse." I looked from one to the other. Not a single hug, no congratulations, just strategy. Then Seraphine reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folder. I recognized the color. It matched her office branding. She slid it across the table like a waitress delivering a check. I had my team mock up a few preliminary plans, she said. Nothing binding, just options. I didn't open it. I'm going to hire a financial advisor, I said evenly. Someone independent. Odessa placed a hand over mine. Rhiannon, money like this, it changes things. You're not equipped to manage something this big. You think I can't handle my own life? I asked, voice calm but sharp. No one said that, Seraphine said quickly. But there are better ways to protect what you've been given. A family trust, for instance. With me as the trustee, it keeps the wealth in-house and safe. You mean in your hands? I said. Her smile thinned. This kind of money ruins people, she said. Especially people not used to it. Odessa added, She's just looking out for you, baby. I leaned back in my chair, my appetite gone. I didn't ask for that. Merrick cleared his throat. At the very least, let us help you with the initial paperwork. No, I said. Not loud, but firm. The room quieted. For the next 20 minutes, we talked about nothing. Weather, TV, my job. Seraphine made sure to remind everyone that she had just landed a corporate branding client in Atlanta. But I wasn't listening anymore. The tone had changed. I wasn't their sister, their daughter, or even their friend in that moment. And I was a windfall, an opportunity to manage, to harvest. When they left, Odessa kissed my forehead like a nurse checking for fever. Merrick patted my shoulder. Seraphine lingered at the entryway, looking around like a realtor measuring resale value. I walked them to the door. As I turned to lock it, I saw it. Seraphine's hand, sliding something into her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. It was white, folded, and definitely not hers. I didn't say a word, but I didn't sleep that night either. The morning after that dinner, I got up early. Not because I had slept well, I hadn't, but because I needed to act normal. Routine had always been my way of staying invisible in the family. And suddenly, I needed that invisibility more than ever. I drove to work like I always did, windows down to keep me alert. My office was a 2-story brick building just off Ashley River Road. It smelled like copier ink and dusty carpeting. Safe, unremarkable. That day, I clung to it like a life raft. During my lunch break, I walked to the bank a block down. I'd decided to deposit a portion of my winnings, just enough to cover some modest upgrades and set up an appointment with a financial planner. I wasn't touching the majority until I knew what I was doing. Dad used to say, "Don't walk into money blind, it'll bite." At the ATM, I entered my PIN. The screen blinked, then displayed a message. Access denied. Joint access. Request processed. Please see branch manager. Joint access. I tried again. Same message. My chest tightened, but I didn't panic. Not yet. Things glitch. Machines mess up. I walked inside, took a breath, and approached the customer service desk. A woman in a navy blazer, Donna, her name tag read, greeted me with a practiced smile. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I'm having trouble accessing my account," I said, keeping my tone light. "There's some kind of joint access notice." She typed on her keyboard, paused, frowned, then typed again. "Oh," she said, carefully. "Yes, I see here there was a request processed 3 days ago. You added a secondary account holder, Seraphine Weaver?" I stared at her. "I didn't authorize that," I said flatly. Donna looked up. "Well, the form is signed. Would you like me to pull a copy?" I nodded, cold, prickling down the back of my neck. A few minutes later, she returned with a manila envelope. Inside was a single-page authorization form, my full name, account number, Seraphine's name as the co-signer, and at the bottom, a signature that looked close enough to mine to fool someone who wasn't paying attention. But I knew my own hand, and I knew I hadn't signed that paper. I thanked Donna, barely, and walked out, keeping the envelope clutched to my chest like it might float away if I loosened my grip. By the time I got home, the sun had shifted past the living room windows, casting long shadows across the floor. I dropped my purse on the counter, opened it, and began rifling through its contents. It wasn't there. The folded paper Seraphine had slipped into her purse during dinner, the one I had seen, the one that I had convinced myself could wait. It was gone. My heart thudded, not from fear, from clarity. She hadn't just planned for this, she'd executed it. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the notary office I had used for lease agreements. I explained the situation, showed the document, and asked if the notary stamp was theirs. "It's a real stamp," the clerk confirmed, "but not from here." I called Merrick next. He picked up on the second ring. "Rhiannon," he said, his voice measured, as always. "I need to talk to you about a document Seraphine filed. She added herself to my account, forged my signature." There was a pause. "That's a serious accusation." "I'm serious. Have you spoken to your mother about this?" "What does that have to do with it?" "Just wondering if this is a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "Let's not make this bigger than it is." I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something inside me stopped asking for validation. That evening, my email pinged with a message from Odessa titled "Forever Grateful Family." Attached was a group photo from the dinner. I opened it. There was the table, the lasagna half-eaten, the candles flickering, Odessa smiling, Merrick toasting, Seraphine leaning forward with that teeth-showing grin she used for magazine shoots. But I wasn't in the picture. I stared at it for a long time, then checked the metadata. It had been edited. Cropped. They had literally removed me from the image. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe I'd stepped out. Maybe I was blurry. I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. "Hello? Mom, I just got your email. That picture. I'm not in it." "Oh," she said lightly. "You were in the shadows, dear. The photo didn't turn out well. I was sitting across from you. You know how these phones are, light sensitivity and all." It was deliberate. Silence, then, "Don't be dramatic, Rhiannon." She hung up. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, lit only by the stove light behind me, and opened a blank notebook. I hadn't written in a journal since college. Back then, it was about heartbreaks and dreams, about wondering if I mattered. Now, it was evidence. I titled the first page, "Asset Seizure and Psychological Patterns of Control, Seraphine and Odessa." I wrote in bullet points, names, dates, details. And then, I ordered a document scanner off Amazon. Rush delivery. The next day, I bought a fireproof safe. I scanned the bank letter, the forged signature, the photo with metadata. Late that night, I folded the copy of the authorization form and slid it into the safe. My fingers paused on the lock. I whispered, not to myself, but to her. "If you're going to erase me, you better be ready when I reappear." The air had shifted. I could feel it in the way Seraphine texted, less words, more punctuation, periods where there used to be exclamations. "Let's talk. Come by. Just us." It had been nearly 2 weeks since the dinner, and she hadn't called once. Then suddenly, an invitation arrived like it was nothing. A message on a weekday afternoon. "Let's reset, Rhi. I think we misunderstood each other. Come by Saturday, just the two of us." No apology, no mention of the forged documents, the signature, the cropped photo, or the sudden joint account that magically included her name. Just a casual olive branch dipped in arsenic. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit. Then I bought a tiny voice recorder, charged it overnight, and slipped it into my purse before heading to her house. Charleston was unusually warm that Saturday, sun sitting heavy above the pines, the kind of weather that made southern hospitality feel sticky. I drove the 12 minutes to Seraphine's gated neighborhood with the windows rolled down, hands calm on the wheel. There was no fear, just calculation. Her house was exactly as I remembered, white columns, black shutters, hedges trimmed like topiaries, and that sterile, magazine-spread feel that never quite felt like home. As I walked up the steps, the scent of lavender cleaner hit me before the door even opened. She greeted me with that glossy smile, arms halfway out like she was debating whether or not to hug me. She didn't. Instead, she stepped aside. "Come in. I made tea." "Thanks," I said, brushing past her. The living room looked staged, not lived in, not real. Throw pillows perfectly angled. No signs of human existence. No mugs, no remote, no open books. Just glass, velvet, and silence. We sat. Seraphine poured the tea, hers in a porcelain cup, mine in something that looked more decorative than functional. I wanted to clear the air, she began. I nodded but didn't reply. Let her work for it. There's been tension, she continued, and I think maybe we both said things, or didn't say things, that contributed to it. That's rich, I thought. I'd said nothing. She'd said everything without saying anything at all. I get it, she said, stirring her tea gently. You feel cornered. Suddenly you have this money, this spotlight, and it's a lot. I feel erased, I said quietly. She blinked. That's not what this is? Isn't it? She leaned forward slightly, voice low, soft, like she was trying not to wake a child. Trust isn't paperwork, Ree. It's a feeling. It's earned. I didn't flinch. Then why'd you fake mine? She froze for half a second, just enough for me to catch it. Then the mask slipped back on. There's a lot you don't understand about what this money means for you. For all of us. For you, you mean? No, she said, smiling sweetly. For the family. I didn't reply, just reached for my purse like I was checking the time, making sure the recorder was running. By late afternoon, the tea had gone cold. We moved toward the foyer. She walked ahead, humming, and I followed behind, purse slung over my shoulder, mind sharp as ever. Her stairs curved slightly at the top, a decorative decision, she once bragged. It made the fall look more dramatic, she said. I hadn't thought about that in years. As I descended, my hand brushed the railing, and I focused on each step, careful, precise. I heard her heels behind me. Then came the shift, a rustle, the faintest brush against my lower back. Not hard, not aggressive, but intentional, controlled. My foot missed the edge of the step. 1, 2, 3. I didn't scream. My body twisted mid-air. The world tilted sideways. My hip hit first, then my shoulder. Finally, the back of my head bounced off the fourth stair, and the light vanished. When I came to, the ceiling was white. I smelled antiseptic. Machines beeped slowly, rhythmically, as if trying to pace my breathing for me. A nurse leaned over me, her eyes kind. You're at Roper St. Francis. You had a fall. Please don't move too quickly. My mouth felt stuffed with cotton. What? You've been here 2 days. You had a concussion and a fractured pelvis. You're lucky you didn't break your spine. My head throbbed. My body screamed in silence. I blinked slowly. Family? I croaked. She hesitated. No one listed you as emergency contact. I stared at the ceiling. Your sister came by, she added quickly, maybe out of guilt. She told us you fell. Said those stairs at her house have always been tricky. Tricky. That word ran laps in my brain like it was training for a marathon. The nurse handed me my purse. We kept your things locked up. I took it with slow, trembling fingers and unzipped it. Everything was there. Wallet, phone, recorder, keys, and one more thing I didn't expect. A crayon drawing folded into quarters. I opened it slowly. Stick figures. One with red curly lines, me. One with yellow straight lines, her. A staircase. The red one tumbling. The yellow one standing behind with a hand extended. At the bottom, Auntie fell. Mommy was there. Signed, Ames. I pressed the paper to my chest. It wasn't evidence in court, but it was something real, something innocent, something no one had edited or filtered or approved. Lying in that hospital bed, I remembered a time when I was 6. A toy broke, a cheap plastic camera I had saved up for. Seraphine took it, snapped the lens off, and when I told Mom, she said, "You probably dropped it." Seraphine had stood beside her, arms crossed, and added, "She's always making up stories." That's what they'd done ever since. Turned my truth into fiction and their fiction into facts. But this time, I had something they didn't. I had a drawing. I folded the paper and slid it under my pillow. My mouth was dry, my bones ached, and my pride was hanging by threads. But I wasn't broken, not yet, and certainly not finished. 3 days passed in that hospital room, and not one familiar face came through the door. Nurses came and went, kind, efficient, distracted, but none of them mentioned a single visitor. No flowers sat on the windowsill, no cards beside the bed. My phone stayed stubbornly silent. I kept it close, checked it every hour just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. But there was nothing except one missed call from a blocked number that never left a voicemail. By the end of the third night, I stopped looking at the door when footsteps passed. I stopped expecting. On the morning of the fourth day, a nurse named Carla gently wheeled in my breakfast tray and asked if I was ready to try sitting up again. I nodded. She smiled the kind of smile that nurses wear like armor. "I'm going to unplug your IV for a bit so we can get your vitals done," she said. "Insurance wants daily updates." I nodded again. My voice was still raspy from the fall, from the silence, from something in between. When she left the room, I reached for my wallet in the drawer. I figured I could at least cover the copay, maybe ask about my account. A little control, a little ground under my feet. I opened my banking app. Access denied. I tried again, fingers tapping slowly, methodically, trying not to let the sting of panic rise too fast. Again, denied. I navigated to the online banking portal and attempted a password reset. The screen flickered. "This account is associated with a deceased identity. Please contact your branch manager." I stared at the words, not at the screen, at the words. Each syllable seemed to slice clean through the haze I'd been wrapped in since the fall. I called the bank. After 3 transfers and a hold long enough for me to hear the same piano loop twice, a woman finally answered. "Ms. Weaver?" she asked, her voice professional but wary. "Yes. I'm showing your account was frozen due to an update in our records." "What kind of update?" She hesitated. "A death certificate was submitted." I didn't respond. According to the system, the account holder, Rhiannon Elise Weaver, was declared deceased. I kept my tone level. "Can you tell me who submitted that document?" A few clicks. "It says it was filed by a verified next of kin, Seraphine Weaver." My throat tightened, but my voice stayed even. "And the date?" 2 days ago." "That's interesting," I said. "Because I was alive. In your system. In this hospital." There was silence on the other end. "I'll need to escalate this," she finally said. "We'll open an internal inquiry." I hung up before she could offer more excuses. The world didn't tilt. It didn't go dark. It sharpened. I buzzed the nurse. "Can I get a printed copy of my hospital admission and records?" I asked. She raised a brow. "Of course. Any specific reason?" "Personal file," I said simply. Within 30 minutes, I had them in hand. Entry date, time of admission, diagnosis, ICU status, all documented. All perfectly clear. Seraphine had declared me dead while I was recovering. I placed the records beside me and stared at the ceiling for what felt like an hour. There was no mourning, no grief, only a numb kind of calculation. I thought about the insurance, about bank holdings, property, legal access. I thought about what someone would need to start shifting those pieces while I was too medicated to stop them. And then I ordered a copy of the death certificate from the Charleston County Clerk's office, same-day processing. By evening, it was in my inbox. I opened it slowly, like I was peeling a scab. Name, Rhiannon Elise Weaver. Date of death, March 12th. Cause, fatal fall, closed head injury. Filed by Seraphine Weaver. Relationship, sister, next of kin. My jaw tensed. It wasn't a metaphor anymore. It wasn't about being erased from a photograph or removed from a bank account. I had been eliminated on paper. I pulled out my notebook. I created a list. DMV license, Social Security records, employer directory health insurance portal, property deeds, medical proxy rights. At the bottom, I wrote one line, underlined twice. Check all systems for proof of erasure. I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. I got methodical. The next morning, while Carla changed my dressing and adjusted my bed angle, I asked her to pass me my phone and a pen. She handed both over without a question. "You feeling okay today?" she asked. I nodded but didn't answer. Instead, I opened a notes app and started collecting every login credential I could think of. Then I called the courthouse again, requested certified copies of any guardianship motions filed in the last week involving my name. The clerk on the other end sounded distracted. You were declared deceased, he repeated, as if I hadn't just told him otherwise. I'm aware, I said. Let me check. Oh. Looks like a petition was filed to assign temporary control of your financial estate, also filed by Seraphine Weaver. I clenched the phone tighter. Has it been granted? Pending hearing. They gave her provisional control until the motion could be reviewed. Of course they had. I stared out the window, watching the wind stir the trees outside, the shadows moving across the pavement like something alive. They had put me in the ground without ever laying hands on a shovel. That afternoon, I requested access to the hospital's public workstation. I logged into my employee email, still active thank God, and sent a message to HR. I informed them of my hospitalization. I requested that no employment changes be processed under my name unless personally confirmed. Then I opened a new document and titled it, Case Log, Identity Theft While Alive. I attached the hospital records, death certificate, court filing notice. It wasn't enough to prove motive, not yet, but it was a start. As the sun dipped lower and painted the hospital walls in orange light, Carla returned to change out my IV. She chatted lightly about her granddaughter's ballet recital, how the little ones all wore mismatched slippers and smiled like they owned the stage. I nodded, smiled where appropriate, but I was elsewhere. My mind had already moved on. As she adjusted the drip, I turned my head toward the window and whispered, so low I wasn't sure if I'd spoken aloud or just mouthed the words, "You buried me before I ever left the bed." I didn't need to check the death certificate again. The words were already burned into memory, but the next morning I checked my inbox anyway, twice. Then I opened the drawer next to my hospital bed and slid the printed copy out just to feel its weight again in my hands, not because I doubted it was real, but because part of me still couldn't believe someone could do that to their own sister and sleep at night. While I stared at it, my phone buzzed once. "Int unknown number." I answered it. "Rhiannon?" the voice whispered. It took me a second to place her. "Nor?" "Yeah. Listen, I don't have long," she said, her tone clipped and anxious. "I'm working temp at the county records office, property transfers, and your sister just dropped off notarized papers this morning. She's transferring a house under your name." I closed my eyes. "I thought you were dead," she added, her voice cracking. "That's what everyone's saying." "They're wrong." She hesitated. "I knew it. I knew something felt off. Her documents. The notary looked clean, but the wording was strange, too polished, like it was written for court, not consent." "You still have access to the originals?" She exhaled. "Not for long." "Can you get me copies?" "I can try, but if she finds out—" "She won't," I said. "Not yet." After we hung up, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the early morning sun bled across the beige walls. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. The nurses made their rounds a little after 9 o'clock. I kept my eyes half closed while they checked the monitors, changed the dressings on my hip, and whispered to each other about which patient wanted ice chips instead of water. I waited until they left before buzzing Carla, the only nurse I halfway trusted. "Can you get me something from security?" I asked. "The logbook for visitors. I want to see if my sister's name is in it." Carla looked confused. "You don't remember seeing her?" "I don't remember her being here," I said. "But she's been telling people she visited." "Hang tight," she said, and 20 minutes later she returned with a printed list. The only names on it were nurses and one janitor. No Seraphine. I smiled. By early afternoon, I requested a copy of the hospital's footage archives. Not video, just logs. The administration denied it. Privacy protocol. But Carla slipped me a page from the staff log. There was no record of any family visiting since I was admitted. Around 3 o'clock, a courier arrived with a flat envelope addressed to me. I recognized the stationery immediately. It was Seraphine's brand, minimalist logo at the top corner, heavy cardstock that screamed expensive taste. Inside was a 2-page letter and a legal form. The letter was typed, ending with my signature. At the bottom of the form was a line where I'd supposedly authorized my sister to make financial and medical decisions on my behalf in the event of incapacitation. It read, I, Rhiannon Elise Weaver, being of sound mind, hereby grant full authority to Seraphine Weaver to act in my best interest regarding financial and real estate decisions until such time that I am fully recovered and able to assume responsibility again. I scanned the paragraph again. I never wrote that. And the signature? It looked close, painfully close, but it wasn't mine. The loop on the R was off, too rounded. My W had always hooked at the end. This one dipped. I flipped the page and held it against the light. The notary stamp looked real, but something about the embossing didn't match what I remembered from actual notarized papers I'd signed in the past. I reached for my phone and dialed Merrick's office. It went to voicemail. His assistant called back a half-hour later. He's out indefinitely, she said flatly. I need him to review a document your office received. I'm not sure. Tell him to look closely at the notary stamp, I said, cutting her off. If it's fake, I'll know. If it's real, I'll sue. She didn't respond, just ended the call. That night, the fluorescent lights flickered above my bed. I couldn't sleep. Every inch of me ached, but it wasn't the bruises. It was the fury that set in once you'd seen something clearly and could no longer pretend not to. I buzzed the nurse's desk. I need to send a fax. Now? Yes, it's time sensitive. I dictated a request to the county clerk's office for certified copies of all property deeds filed under my name in the last 30 days. Then I sent a second request to the recorder of deeds for any documents involving Seraphine and the address of my new home. The nurse didn't ask questions, just helped feed the pages into the machine. I watched them disappear into the machine, page by page, like breadcrumbs leading me back to myself. Over the next 2 days, more documents arrived. A trust agreement. A revocation of ownership on a parcel of land that hadn't even been legally titled to me yet, all bearing my name, all signed by someone pretending to be me. I started a new file folder, labeled it Active Fraud, SW. It felt small, that manila folder, but inside it was power, proof, fuel. On the third night, I unfolded the letter Seraphine had sent and read it again, slowly. The phrasing wasn't hers. It had Merrick's fingerprints all over it. Formal, sanitized, and just vague enough to sound plausible in front of a judge. I stared at the signature once more. Then I whispered to the page, Nice handwriting. Shame it's not mine. By the time the nurse changed my bandages that evening, I had already begun printing labels for a folder I never thought I'd need. Phoenix. It felt right. From ashes, from lies, from a hospital bed where I'd been declared dead before I even stopped breathing. This was my rebirth. The next morning, Carla lingered at the foot of my bed longer than usual. She glanced around, making sure no one else was near. She held a thumb drive between her fingers, half concealed by her palm. I shouldn't be doing this, she said softly. But I thought you'd want to hear it for yourself. What is it? Your sister. She was in the hallway 3 nights ago. I always record hallway interactions. It's a safety measure, mostly to protect staff from complaints. She didn't know she was being recorded. She slipped the drive into my hand and walked away without another word. I waited until the lunch trays came and went, until the hall quieted, until I was alone. Then I plugged the drive into the hospital's patient lounge laptop. No one checked. They never did. The audio started with footsteps, heels, Seraphine's, unmistakably, then a voice, hers, whispering just above the noise of carts rolling down the corridor. She doesn't know anything yet, she said. But we need to move, finish the transfers, now, before she wakes up and asks too many questions. Merrick's voice followed, hushed and tense. We're already deep in this, Seraphine. We have to be careful. She's not a threat, Seraphine replied. She's Rhiannon. My heart didn't race. It slowed. A quiet rage bloomed in my chest like something ancient waking up. I burned the audio onto a new USB drive, labeled it Primary Evidence 1A. I added it to my Phoenix folder, along with the hospital's visitor logs, the forged signature documents, and the medical timeline proving I was very much alive when my death certificate was filed. Then I drafted a letter. Handwritten. No lawyer speak, no threats, just clarity. You taught me how to disappear. I hope you taught yourself how to fall. I signed it in black ink, sealed it in an envelope with the USB, the fake signature, the security log, and a copy of the notary analysis. I didn't use my own handwriting on the address label. I printed it, clean and sharp. The hospital courier had a pickup window before noon. I gave the envelope to Carla with simple instructions. Deliver this to Seraphine Weaver's office. It's legal correspondence. Carla nodded without asking a thing. By the next morning, the phone in my room rang at 7:42 a.m. I picked up. Are you out of your mind? Seraphine's voice exploded through the speaker. Good morning to you, too. What do you want? I glanced at my folder. My name back. Is this blackmail? It's documentation. There was a pause. I've taken care of everything, she said, the edge in her voice turning brittle. This could have been handled quietly. You handled it quietly, I replied. I'm choosing volume. You always were dramatic. No, Seraphine, I was quiet. That's different. The line went dead. That same afternoon, I asked the doctor if I could begin physical therapy. Walking won't be easy, he warned. It never has been, I told him. Carla helped me into the walker. My legs trembled with every movement. My hip burned. But I moved, inch by inch, step by brutal step. As I turned the corner of the hallway, Carla lifted her phone. She didn't say anything, just filmed. Quietly, as if she knew I'd want proof, not just for others, but for myself. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The walk was slow, deliberate, like everything in my life had suddenly become. Later that night, I reviewed the footage. I saved the video under the same folder, Recovery Day 1, Rehearsal. Not recovery, rehearsal. I was no longer the woman who waited. By evening, I slept with my hand resting on the Phoenix folder beside my bed. The documents, the audio, the steps, all of it was real. All of it mine. No one would be erasing me again. The email notification pinged at 10:41 p.m., and I didn't even need to read it. I knew. I could feel it. Still, I opened my inbox with a steady hand and clicked. The subject line read, "You'll regret this." No greeting, no sign-off, just those 3 words. I stared at the screen, not angry, not surprised, just done. The next morning, I woke early before the nurses even began their shift. Sunlight hadn't yet breached the blinds, but I reached for my phone anyway, thumb hovering over my voicemail tab. One new message. It was from my mother. Hi, honey. I just wanted to let you know that Seraphine came by yesterday. She looked so tired, bless her. She's handling everything so gracefully. It's been so hard on all of us, especially her. You know, she's always been the one holding us together. I just hope you're not making this harder than it needs to be. Okay, call me if you can. She ended the message with a soft click, like punctuation on a slap. My breath caught, not out of shock, but out of exhaustion. I played it again, then a 3rd time. By the 5th, I knew I wouldn't ever hear that voicemail the same way again. It wasn't just a message, it was an indictment. I was the disruption, the drama, the inconvenience. Seraphine was the backbone of the family. I deleted the message. Then I reached for my journal and wrote 1 word on the top of a blank page. Enough. That afternoon, Noor called. I hadn't expected to hear from her again so soon, but when her name flashed across my screen, I answered immediately. Rhiannon, she whispered. You're not going to believe what I just found. I might, I said. Try me. I've been reviewing court records for property filings, right? And I pulled everything tied to your name, something flagged under emergency guardianship protocols. I sat up straighter in bed. Merrick filed them, she continued, 2 days after your accident. He submitted your death certificate and a petition for legal guardianship over your estate. Wait, I said. He filed them personally? Yes, and it wasn't just Seraphine's name on the request. It was signed by both of them. I clenched the blanket in my lap. So he knew. More than that, Noor said quietly. I pulled an old business license. Seraphine and Merrick co-own a shell corporation, property management, house flipping. It's been inactive for 2 years, but they used it to transfer a deed last month. I didn't respond right away. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just family drama. It was business. A strategic elimination of a variable in their long-term plan. And that variable had been me. I closed my eyes and inhaled through my nose, slow and deliberate. Thank you, I said. Please keep copies of everything. And Noor? Yeah? Be careful. After we hung up, I reached for my old laptop. I had managed to recover it the previous day from my apartment. Noor had dropped it off herself. It still had a bit of battery left, enough for me to log into one of my backup accounts. Or so I thought. My password didn't work. I tried the reset option. The system prompted me to verify using my email. Email? It had been changed. I attempted to recover the email account. It, too, had been locked. The recovery phone number was no longer mine. Every route back into my digital life had been sealed off, like someone had poured cement over my online existence and etched Seraphine's initials into the top. I stared at the screen. This wasn't panic. This was war. I filed a financial fraud report with my bank. I called the credit bureau and placed a freeze on my identity. I requested logs from every account I could think of. Social Security, DMV, health insurance, my employer's HR department. I sent out 22 emails in 3 hours. Then I drafted the letter, a formal cease and desist. To Seraphine Weaver and Merrick Langston, this communication serves as a formal notice of intent to pursue legal action for the following: fraudulent declaration of death, forgery of financial documents, unauthorized guardianship filings, identity theft, emotional and financial damages. Attached, copies of forged documentation, a notarized timeline of my hospital stay, and preliminary witness statements. At the bottom, I included one more document, a court notice of motion. I had filed it that morning, electronically, with the help of a free legal clinic that specialized in elder and family fraud cases. Subject line of the email: you have 10 days before the truth is public. I hit send and waited. The response came sooner than I expected. That night, 3 words: you'll regret this. I smiled, because I already had. The courthouse stood quiet in the early light, the air thick with humidity that hadn't quite burned off yet. The parking lot was already half full, the kind of people who arrive early not because they're afraid to be late, but because they want to own the room before anyone else enters it. I adjusted the collar of my black dress and stepped out of the car, gripping my cane more firmly than I needed to. It wasn't just for balance anymore. It had become a symbol, a message to anyone watching that I had survived something meant to end me. Inside, the courtroom buzzed quietly. Local media had picked up the story after Noor shared my statement through her connections. They didn't use my name, but the details were enough. Woman declared dead fights to reclaim identity. It didn't need more. As I walked down the center aisle, I could feel the eyes. Some curious, some skeptical, a few kind. At the plaintiff's table, my attorney, Greg Fallon, stood and gave me a small nod. Straightforward, professional, the kind of person who knew how to wield silence better than words. Across the aisle, Seraphine sat next to Merrick. She wore charcoal gray, her hair curled, her posture impeccable. A performance. Her eyes flicked toward me and then away, as if I were a painting she couldn't bear to look at too long. Odessa was there too. Back row, alone. Her hands folded in her lap, chin tilted downward, pretending not to recognize her youngest daughter. She had always played that role well, the mother too fragile to pick a side, too practical to get involved. But today, everyone was involved. Court was called into session at 9:03 a.m. The judge, a woman named Linda Carson, opened with a neutral expression and a steady tone. She addressed the room like it was any other day, any other case, but it wasn't. Not for me. Fallon stood. Your Honor, we are here to present a case of deliberate fraud, forged legal documentation, and the falsification of death records against my client, Rhiannon Weaver, by her sister Seraphine Weaver and their family's longtime legal counsel, Merrick Langston. He turned to face the courtroom, not theatrically, just directly. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a family dispute. This is premeditated erasure. I took a breath and stood. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't falter. I was pushed down a staircase in my sister's home. I suffered a fractured pelvis and a concussion. While recovering in the hospital, unable to walk, I learned I had been declared dead, officially, with a death certificate bearing my name and cause of death, filed by my sister. Fallon handed the judge the document. I continued. She claimed I died of a head injury while I was still alive and speaking with nurses. My accounts were frozen, my property deeds transferred, my email addresses rerouted, my identity stolen. Silence settled like fog. My crime was surviving. Fallon stepped forward again. Your Honor, we have evidence to support all of these claims. He turned to the projector screen. First, an audio file recorded by hospital staff. In it, Seraphine and Merrick discuss finalizing the financial transfers before Rhiannon, quote, wakes up and starts asking questions. The room held its breath as the clip played. She doesn't know anything yet. Let's finish this before she does. The judge's expression hardened. She nodded once. Next, Fallon continued, we have notarized documents with forged signatures, including financial and medical power of attorney, all filed without Ms. Weaver's consent. He handed them over, one by one. Hospital security logs show no recorded visits from Seraphine during Rhiannon's entire hospital stay, despite her claims of being present daily. He paused. We also have a statement from Carla Dunn, a registered nurse, and Noor Patel, an employee at the county records office, both of whom witnessed suspicious filings and behavior that contradict the defense's narrative. He walked back to the screen. And finally, this. He pulled out a framed crayon drawing. The gallery murmured. Fallon explained, this drawing was created by Rhiannon's 8-year-old nephew, Ames. In it, he depicts Rhiannon falling down the stairs with Seraphine behind her, hand outstretched. The caption reads, Auntie fell, Mommy was there. He placed the drawing on the evidence table. The courtroom was utterly silent. The judge looked at Seraphine. Do you have a response? Her lawyer stood, but she interrupted him, stood on her own. Everything I did was to protect our family, she said, voice steady but rising in pitch. Rhiannon was reckless. She didn't know how to handle that kind of money. I was just trying to keep things from falling apart. I stood again. You erased one of us to protect the illusion of all of us. She blinked, the first crack in her performance appearing just beneath her left eye. The judge raised a hand. Enough. The rest moved quickly. Judge Carson ruled in my favor. My legal identity was fully restored. Property ownership reinstated. The death certificate was nullified. A criminal investigation into Seraphine's conduct was formally opened. Merrick was referred to the Bar Association for ethics violations. Fallon turned to me after the gavel fell and said quietly, You don't have to say anything. But I did. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight was soft and the air carried that particular coastal sharpness I hadn't felt in weeks. I stood still for a moment, cane planted, feet firm. They buried me with lies, I said softly, almost to myself. I resurrected with the truth. The day I left Charleston County Courthouse, I didn't go back to my old apartment. I didn't call anyone. I didn't celebrate. I just drove. No destination, no playlist, no rush. The following week, I signed a lease for a modest cottage just outside Folly Beach. Quiet road, white porch, wild grass curling at the edges of the walkway. The kind of place that didn't demand anything from you except to rest and breathe. I unpacked only what I needed, just enough clothes, one coffee mug, a radio, and the fireproof safe I'd brought from the hospital. Everything else stayed boxed, some boxes I never opened. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. But I kept them, like caution tape around memories I wasn't ready to throw out. Most mornings, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my legs, mug in hand, listening to the surf whisper past the dunes. I could still feel the bruises some days, the ones they couldn't see, the ones that hadn't changed color, just shape. The court documents, notarized statements, and the drawing from Ames all rested in the safe. Not because I feared losing them, but because I needed to remember. Not the pain, the proof. the line I crossed and never stepped back from. A few weeks after moving in, I found an envelope tucked inside the last box I unpacked, one I hadn't even remembered packing. The handwriting was old, neat, my name on the front, from Thatcher, my father's best friend, the man who showed up when Dad didn't. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, sunlight pushing through the blinds, and opened it. Inside was a photograph, me, about 10 years old, grinning on a wooden porch. This porch, sitting on a faded step with an ice cream cone melting in one hand and a paperback book in the other. And beneath the photo, a short note. "You were always more than they let you be. Don't forget it this time." I held it to my chest. My throat ached, not from sadness, but from something heavier, recognition. He had seen me back then, and somehow he knew I would need to be reminded. The next day, I bought a small frame and placed the photo on my nightstand. That was the first picture of me I displayed in years. As for the rest of the family, Seraphine was out on bail, her trial date pending. The media pressure had grown heavy, relentless. She was no longer the polished PR queen of Charleston. Comment sections under her former client's social media were flooded with questions like, "Isn't this the woman who tried to erase her sister?" Merrick had his license suspended pending ethics review. His office had been shuttered, and rumors circulated that he might lose his pension. No one had seen him since the ruling. And Odessa? No calls, no texts, no knock on the door. But one day, a letter arrived, no return address, typed in all capital letters on plain printer paper. No salutation, just, "I didn't know everything. I didn't want to believe it. I'm sorry. I hope you're okay." I didn't need a signature. I knew it was her. I folded the paper in half and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Not in the safe, not on display, just somewhere out of sight. I didn't respond. Forgiveness, I'd come to learn, was something you gave yourself. And sometimes, you gave it to others in the quietest of ways, by not chasing them anymore. Ames sent me a card a few weeks later. He drew another picture, a stick figure of a woman walking into the sun, hair wild, smile wide. No caption this time, just a heart. I placed it beside Thatcher's photo. Online, people began reaching out, quietly at first. Emails, anonymous messages, women who had been pushed to the margins by their families, silenced, rewritten, declared too emotional, ungrateful, difficult. They saw themselves in me, not because I was brave, but because I came back. I never gave interviews. I didn't want headlines, but I did want to help. So I started a grant, a small one, local, built with the first installment of the settlement the court awarded. I called it the Phoenix Fund. It wasn't for legal battles, it was for rent deposits, new IDs, a month of groceries, gas money, the tiny things that helped women start over when no one else believed they existed anymore. I didn't tell many people about it. I didn't need to. Some mornings, I'd open my inbox to find one-line emails from strangers. "You reminded me I'm still here." That was enough. There were still days I missed what I never had. A real mother. A protective sister. A family that held space for me instead of trying to contain me. But I had learned this much. Survival isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet choice to stay, to try again, to live when everything told you to vanish. On a warm morning in early spring, I walked barefoot to the shoreline just before sunrise. The sand was cool underfoot, and the horizon blinked with the first blush of day. I didn't cry. I didn't write a poem or whisper a mantra. I just stood there, letting the ocean speak for me. When I came back inside, I opened my journal and wrote, "Some wounds don't close, but they stop bleeding." I closed the cover, and I didn't reopen it, because I no longer needed to write the ending. I was living it. I wasn't saved by anyone. I survived by remembering who I was before they tried to bury me. Some stories aren't about revenge. They're about reclaiming the space someone tried to erase you from. If this story made you think about trust, identity, or the price of silence in your own life, you're not alone. So let me ask you, have you ever felt like the people closest to you rewrote your role in their lives without asking? If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from nothing, not just to survive, but to be seen again, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you're drawn to real, raw family stories that reveal both the beauty and brutality of human connection, make sure to subscribe because more is coming.